Hi everyone, Alex here. Today I'm going to go through 20 tips and tricks in Cavalry that you might not know about. If you've been using Cavalry for a while, you might already know some of these, but there could still be a hidden gem in here for you. So, let's get started. You can edit both values of an attribute at the same time using the Alt key on Windows or the Options key on macOS. To do this, simply load the shape or layer that you want to edit into the attribute editor. Holding Alt or Options, you can click and drag in one field of an attribute to edit both attributes at the same time. Alternatively, holding Ctrl or Command Alt will lower the increments you scrub, whilst holding Shift and Alt will increase it. If you already know the value that you want to type in, you can simply type it in, hold Alt or Options and then press Enter, and this will also edit both values at the same time. You can press F to focus on a shape or layer in the viewport. Simply select the layer that you want to focus on and press F. Alternatively, with nothing selected, pressing F will recenter the composition to fit the viewport. This also works for resetting focus in the time or graph editor. You can hold Alt or Options to move the pivot point of a selected shape in the viewport. If you want to recenter the pivot point with the shape selected, you can go to Shape, Center Pivot, and this will automatically place the pivot point directly in the center of your shape. Alt or Options can also be used to duplicate shapes in the viewport. Simply hold Alt and then click and drag the layer you want to duplicate. Coincidentally, this can also be used to duplicate keyframes in the time editor. Simply select the keyframes you want to duplicate, hold Alt, click and drag. You can update the UI during playback. All you have to do is press this button here beneath the viewport. This will update elements like the playback head in the scene window and attributes in the time editor. Hovering over these buttons will also reveal useful information in the form of a tooltip. Tooltips can be found in many places throughout Cavalry's UI. If you need some inspiration, Cavalry is also home to some pretty awesome scene presets. Using the Scene Presets button up here in the shelf, you can find some great examples of Forge Dynamics, JavaScript, and much more. These are all completely customizable and a great way to get started in Cavalry. Also, if you haven't gone pro yet, you can use these presets to check out features like Forge Dynamics. So it's worth spending some time here if you're getting to know Cavalry or you just want to have a play with some cool features. Whilst we're talking about presets, there's also some great text animation presets. Simply select the text shape that you want to animate, go to the Create menu, Animation Presets, and select one of the animations from the drop-down. Let's go with Bounce In. Press play and see how much time you've saved. Now's the perfect time to talk about reusing nodes. Say you've got a second text shape and you want that to have the same animation as the one we've just made. You don't have to create new effects or behaviors for this. You can simply connect the existing layers to the new text shape that you want to add the animation to. So in this example, I'm going to drag a connection from the submesh to the new text shape's deformers. And now when we press play, both text shapes have the same animation. This one's really important because this can make larger, more expensive scenes run much smoother. You don't have to use tons of copy and pasted nodes. I'll show you one of my favorite examples of reusing nodes while also showing you a neat trick with the distortion filter. So first off, I'm going to create an ellipse shape using Alt and click. I'm going to increase the radius. I'm going to go to the Fill tab, right click Shaders, and I'm going to add a multi-point gradient shader. Back on the ellipse's shape tab, I'm going to go to the filters, and I'm going to add a distortion filter. Now, on the distortion filter, you'll see on the shaders tab that we're currently using an input shader, which is a noise shader. Now, we could switch this to a multi-point gradient shader, but this isn't going to be the same multi-point gradient shader that we've already got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a connection from our existing multi-point gradient shader to the input shader of the distortion. Replace connection. What this means is we can now use the same multi-point gradient shader to distort our shape as well as applying a shader effect. Let's open the distortion filter and increase padding on the settings tab. With the shader selected, you can now use the viewport tools to edit directly from the viewport. This will create a pretty cool metaballs effect. One other freebie here is that the Alt Options duplicate method works to duplicate the gradient points. Now, if you want to add color to these points, you can simply click and drag a swatch from the library palettes onto one of the points of the multipoint gradient. Pretty neat. Many layers in Cavalry have a blend modes attribute. Using different combinations of blend modes on both shapes and effects will produce some interesting styles worth playing with. If an attribute already has keyframes, you can create new ones using the Viewport tools. This can be a huge time saver. In this example, if I add keyframes to point 1's position Y and its influence attribute, I can simply move to a new frame, reposition the point, and also hold Shift and drag to increase its influence. Now I've animated position and influence with ease. You can also connect these attributes to other attributes in Cavalry if you want them to have the same keyframe animation. Simply drag a connection anchor from your keyframed attribute directly onto another attribute to give it the same animation. Here, I'm going to connect position Y from point 1 to position Y on point 2. Press play and you'll see point 2 is now animated on the Y-axis also. So, you've now got an attribute that's being controlled by another attribute's animation. You can actually apply expressions to attributes with incoming connections to perform mathematical operations on values and change the animation. To set an attribute expression, right-click an attribute with an incoming connection, add expression, and now here I'm going to use divide by 2. This will output half the value of the controlling attribute. You can use this on any attribute with an incoming connection. You can find some examples of attribute expressions in the docs. We'll add a link to those under this video. Moving on. You have an animation, but now you're wondering how to add motion blur. Motion blur has to be activated both in the scene window and on the shape you want to affect. You can find the motion blur button here next to composition settings and also as an attribute on the layer you want to apply it to. Now when you press play, your animation has motion blur. You've added motion blur, but now you think you might need to speed up or slow down your animation. You can easily edit your existing keyframes in the time editor using the transform tools. The transform tool can be activated using this button underneath the time editor. The transform tool can be used to move and scale a selection of keys. If you marquee select all of your keyframes, you'll see a green area around your selected keys. Click and drag the middle of the green area to move the entire selection, or click and drag at an end to scale the animation. You've set the speed of your animation, and now you want to give it a smoother transition. There are some preset magic easing functions you can use to do this easily. Just select the keyframes you want to apply easing to, right-click, magic easing. Select anything from the drop-down. I'm going to choose slow in, slow out. If you'd rather manually edit this, or you just want to see the animation curve, you can switch to the graph editor by pressing the graph editor button under the scene window. You can duplicate a layer and have the duplicate begin from the current frame, whilst also making the original layer end at the current frame. You can do this using the duplicate and split option in the edit menu. You can also quickly change the clip start or end points of a layer using Alt, Options and square brackets. But if you're after a more procedural way to do this, you can use time markers. To create a time marker, right-click anywhere in the timeline, add time marker, and now you can drag a connection anchor from the time marker to any clip start or end in the time editor. This is a great way to edit multiple start and end points at the same time. Okay, so that was my 20 tips and tricks in Cavalry that you might not know about. Thank you for sticking around, and I hope you found something useful here. Be sure to subscribe for more videos like this, and please let us know if there's any tutorials you want to see. We'd love to hear from you. We're more than happy to help out, and we love seeing your animations. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.